did mention in your testimony, in your written submission, that tariffs on raw components are going to be a big impact for you. Could you just talk us through that?
That's more for our supply chain. So
yeah,
we're working
indeed.
obviously with Paul's organisation to ensure that our suppliers understand that some of them are quite small companies, don't have the capacity to understand all of these. So we are ensuring that, you know, that just in time is important, maybe not quite like Honda, but just remember what I said about the Beluga aircraft every 2 hours, excuse me. So that's really something we need to keep an eye on. But on the raw materials side, it's more than linked to the inward processing relief issue.
From experience as a supplier on these programs, I think you can't underestimate, as the production is ramping up on the big civil programs, every day is a battle to get the parts out on time, and the penalties for not getting them there on time are very severe, and therefore in avoiding being late, it can very quickly, any of these non-tariff barriers can very quickly drive up costs. And I think it's also important to understand just how all-pervasive this is. One of the examples has come to my attention is aerospace chemicals, where because of the licensing regime for chemicals within the EU, we have chemical manufacturers that within aerospace we use very specialist chemicals because we have very, very exotic alloys usually to keep the weight down on the aircraft. Moving those chemicals around to actually end up with the final product is usually internal within Europe. So we have there's a product called Aerospace 1200, which is a very essential low volume paint, but is very, very important for keeping the aircraft flying. It's usually touched up. The precursor chemicals are made in the UK. The actual product is produced into the final Aerochrome in Belgium. And at the moment, the licensing regime allows the movement of the chemicals between the two. The day we leave the EU without a new agreement in place, that stops. And Aerochrome 1200 is very small volume. It's really hard to justify relicensing costs against the revenue on it. Nonetheless, it's an absolutely essential chemical for use in aerospace. So the implications are very broad, far-reaching.
Different parts of Europe specialise in different parts of the aircraft. You know, we wouldn't be able to create the volume we did if it was just done in one country. They're doing their best in China. We need to keep an eye on what the Chinese industry is doing. Of course, a very important customer potentially for a lot of UK supply chain. I think the other thing to look at is what's the value. As Simon said, the real value is in our designers, the wing designers, and they're really specialists in the UK on aerodynamics. That's a matter of history. It's not necessarily a matter of government policy. It's a matter of history. The UK engineers are just really good at it. And not only that, there's also landing gear design and integration, fuel systems. Everyone talks about the wings, which we're very proud of, but there's other parts of aircraft design and manufacture that we also do.
We shouldn't forget propulsion systems and engines. We're quite good at those.
Also Spirit Aero Systems, very capable supplier based in Scotland. So, you know, it's important we keep that capacity and build on that. And that is what I see as my job, is fighting to ensure that the wing design, what we call the crown jewels of aerospace, remains in this country. I need to let you know, committee, that other countries would dearly love to design and build wings. And some of them already do. We actually do build wings in China now. And believe you me, they're knocking at the door as a result of the situation that we're in this country.
Well, following on from that, can I ask you all that, can you speculate on what would happen to the industry if the UK were to depart the EU and the ESA without any sort of deal?
For us, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the worst outcome for us is a no deal. And that's because it would create a chaotic environment. So ranging from, without a deal, we wouldn't know if there was a common transit area. We wouldn't know whether, lorry drivers and lorries from the UK could travel on UK roads. We don't know what the border arrangements would be. So if you like, for us, working all the way back, we wouldn't even know if we can get our products out of the UK or what the costs might be associated in doing that. And similarly on the regulatory regime, I know Simon will probably talk in more detail, but again, if we don't have a regulatory regime that is recognised globally, then we cannot sell our products.
What would that mean?
That would mean that we would have to find an alternative arrangement. And so, and Simon mentioned earlier, at the moment, if you like, our fallback position is that we would be inviting in the European Aviation Safety Agency or the Federal Aviation Agency to certify our facilities and our products, and we'll obviously be paying for the privilege of doing that. So short term, there is an extreme fallback. We'd be like a school in special measures. We'd have the authorities coming over to help us out, but that's not a long-term solution, because the costs associated with that are many, many times what our current cost base would be.
I suppose what I'm trying to get to before the others answer is, what is the impact of that? Because I can understand that you might want to get some clarity, you might want to get some help, but if there were no deal, what is the impact of that? What does it mean to people, to business, to turnover, to production? What are those impacts?
It depends exactly where you are in the business, but in terms of part of our trouble, if you like, will be is that in the very short term we have no choice. We will have to absorb the cost because we will have to supply our end customer. As we move forward, all that means is it will be much more difficult to persuade people that they should continue to be investing in the UK and stick with the UK. There is always a cost associated with realigning supply chains, so people do not make those decisions willingly or easily, but clearly, depending on what the future looks like, people would make those decisions.
I think the implications we need to, as the Royal Aeronautical Society looks at the whole of aerospace, so it's not just engineering and the development and production side, it's also air traffic management, ground crews, the air crews themselves. No deal and leaving on the basis we are today, with no work done in between, there would be actually, what I don't want to do is raise headlines of, we stop flying tomorrow, but the truth is, there are currently no agreements in place outside the EU that would allow aircraft to operate in and out of UK aerospace. So there's a vast amount of work that would need to be done to either resurrect dormant bilateral agreements or renegotiate agreements to allow transit between the EU and the UK, and then the UK and other nations, because at the moment our aviation rights are done through the EU. So it's not insurmountable, but if we're going to do it, we'd better start pretty quickly, because there's a great amount of work to do. And the nature of regulation is such that you cannot fly on the basis of it's an assumption that it's in both our interests to fly. You need to have an agreement negotiated, signed, because that's what safety actually means. You need an agreement detailed and in place and legally binding.
So looking at calls from the press and other siren voices that say we should just walk away from the talks in Europe now. I think your evidence is that would be devastating for your sector.
I'm very hesitant to use such words. It would very definitely have walk away today on the basis we have today, with no work done in between, would actually have a very, very, very severe impact. But clearly it's understanding what the direction is, so that we use the time we've got left to work well, to make sure that we have the agreements in place to be able to move forward on the day.
Is that because those agreements aren't in place, anybody walking away from the talks now would effectively ground UK aircraft?
So
yes.
my view is it would be chaotic.
Yeah.
Because we would not have the certainty that we require, and again, particularly around safety. Safety is born on that sort of dull repetition, minor changes, adaptation, ensuring everything is done and done correctly. So a situation where we were having to, and the whether it's government and others, having to put in place very rapidly measures and activities, there will always be risks associated with that.